So yeah, first of all, thanks everyone for joining this morning. So this webinar is kind of a national webinar, which is part of the Decarb City Pipes project, which Codema are a partner on. And I guess we're kind of focusing on kind of removing barriers to heat transition in Ireland in this webinar. So we're taking the lessons learned from developing the Dublin heat transition roadmap, which was one of the deliverables of the project. Just for those of you who might not be aware of who Codema are, so Codema are the energy agency for Dublin, so we're a non-for-profit public good company limited by guarantee, and we work on behalf of the four Dublin local authorities to accelerate Dublin's low carbon transition. And we do that through kind of innovative local level energy and climate change research, planning, engagement, and project delivery. So essentially our mission is to mitigate the effects of climate and improve the lives of citizens in Dublin. So yeah, as you can see, our kind of company structure is kind of split into three cells, as we call them, across kind of research, development and innovation, awareness, communication and engagement, and low carbon project delivery. But the local authorities still are very much at the core of what we do. To just provide a bit of background context as well in terms of heating and what the targets are in relation to heat for at a national level. So the Climate Action Plan 2023 has these targets in terms of installing individual heat pumps. So 45,000 in existing and 170,000 in new dwellings by 2025. That increases to 400,000 in existing and 280,000 in new dwellings by 2030. And then on the district heating, which is one of the main focuses of this project, as the City Pipes title might suggest, there's a lot of focus on pipes in the project, be it district heating or what the role of gas pipes might be in the future. So in that respect, we're looking at a 0.8 terawatt-hour target in terms of district heating installed by 2025 and 2.7 terawatt-hours by 2030. Which that 2030 target is roughly equivalent to about 10% of all the residential and commercial heating in the country. So it's a significant chunk, starting from less than 1% as we are at the moment. And there's also targets in relation to renewable gas, so up to 0.4 terawatt-hours for heating provided by renewable gas by 2050, and then that increases to 0.7 terawatt-hours for heating by 2030. Now, I think we're probably assuming that heating is higher temperature heating rather than anything else, but yeah, so those are kind of the overall targets that the country is hoping to achieve in the next few years. Just to give a background of the project itself then, so I guess we've kind of city partners from across Europe. So the cities involved were Bilbao, Bratislava, Dublin, Munich, Rotterdam, Vienna, and Winterthur in Switzerland. And I suppose we're looking at developing these kind of effective local governance structures and local working groups in each city, which was done as part of the project to identify and address kind of knowledge gaps through kind of peer-to-peer learning. So there was kind of workshops throughout the project where knowledge was exchanged on things like geothermal and heat planning and zoning and things like that. And I guess one of the big deliverables were these transition roadmaps, so producing these actionable transition roadmaps for each city. And Codema were the lead on that particular deliverable. And we also led on, I guess, co-creating the Dublin transition roadmap with key local stakeholders. And all this was kind of I guess overlooked by a distinguished advisory board, which kind of challenged any of the outputs and conclusions of the project. So we had representatives from Eurogas, kind of former DGs for the DG Energy from the EU, and a lot of distinguished people, I guess, involved in that to check that the outputs of the project were of good quality. Just kind of drilling down a bit more into the transition roadmap itself. So this is actually published on the Decarb City Pipes website. But I guess the main sections are, it's sort of a description of the kind of current status in Dublin, what we have in terms of current heat supply and demands. We also have a kind of a heating and cooling plan, so kind of what our vision is, out to 2050, and I guess showing kind of what should go where, in essence, in terms of should it be district heating, should it be heat pumps, like kind of the two options that we've looked at really. And obviously there may be a role as well for the gas network when we're talking about things like just power generation and stuff like that, or potentially very high temperature heat as well. And then I suppose the report itself also talks through the kind of process of developing the transition roadmap. So the kind of workshops we held, the kind of process we adopted, I kind of touch on it a bit more in one of the later slides. And then the kind of, I guess, the main output then were the actions. So there's 65 actions in the report, which look to kind of tackle the barriers that were identified through the workshops. And there's some kind of indicative timelines, as well as naming potential lead and support organizations that could be involved in delivering each action, and supporting information. So things like examples or case studies from other countries, kind of documents that provide further reading on the topic. So they're kind of in there as well as a sort of a resource for people who may be leading on these actions in the future. So yeah, I guess just to give an overview of our heating and cooling plan. So this was a lot of work from this actually started with the Dublin Regional Energy Master Plan, which we completed there maybe 2 years ago. And I suppose we kind of use that to inform our heating and cooling plan. And I suppose the key findings for that are that it shows that kind of between 70 and 87% of the heat demand in Dublin could be cost effectively supplied through district heating, or most cost effectively supplied through district heating. So district heating is going to play a big role essentially in what we're doing. And I suppose just those figures come from kind of the mapping exercise on the right hand side there, where we've kind of I suppose pitted district heating and heat pumps against each other for every small area in Dublin. So there are roughly 5,000 small areas in Dublin. And kind of come out with a preferred technology based on the cost of carbon abatement, so the euro per tonne of CO2 saved. And then the kind of dark red areas are kind of the areas that are very strongly hint towards district heating, and the dark blue areas are the areas that hint very strongly towards individual heat pumps. And then as they get lighter and lighter, I suppose the differences get smaller and smaller. So those are the areas that could switch, maybe depending on certain changes and variables. And then we also did an analysis of the heat source options. So this is kind of a breakdown of what's in Dublin, but I guess minus the data centres probably is a reasonable overview of what could be possible in a lot of other parts of the country as well. So you can see that deep geothermal is a big one. Seawater, surface water, wastewater treatment plants, power stations, although they're the availability of heat from those will likely reduce as they're kind of operating for less and less run hours per year. There's still an opportunity there. So yeah, I suppose the finding from that as well is that we kind of have an awful lot of heat that could be used. So there's enough heat there to heat 1.6 million homes. So that's more than the number of homes in Dublin. So yeah, and that's only the heat sources we've identified. I'm sure it's not an exhaustive list as well. I suppose the other thing to mention as well is kind of national studies that have been done. So this is the national heat study produced by SEAI. And I suppose one of the main findings from that was up to 54% of heat demand in the country could be cost effectively supplied through district heating. So, and that has a very similar figure to a previous study that was done by Heat Roadmaps Europe as well, which suggested, I think it was 56%. So again, there's kind of good alignment between those two national studies. So I guess we can say that district heating will play an important role in decarbonising heat at a national level, as well as in Dublin. So yeah, just maybe to run through the development processes as well. And yeah, maybe just to say as well, I know some people are typing in the Q&A, so if you do want to type questions in there at any point, feel free to do so. We can run through them at the end. I think we've left a good bit of time to kind of have a bit of a discussion and a Q&A at the end. So the process of developing the transition roadmap then, I guess just to say who was sort of involved in kind of workshops. So we had a kind of what we call the local working group, which was made up of important representatives in the Dublin area, and who would also, I guess, be important representatives in a national context as well. So at a national level, we had, the department, Geological Survey Ireland, the SAI, ESB, CRU and Gas Networks Ireland. Then at the kind of regional level, we had ourselves. And then at the local level, we had the kind of local authorities, so all 4 local authorities in Dublin. And then I suppose the kind of general process itself was, first identifying barriers to kind of heat transition, and then ranking those by importance and immediacy, so how quickly they need to be addressed. And then following that, kind of identifying potential actions that could help address those barriers. And where possible, we've used kind of existing examples as well. And then following that, it was sort of teasing out who we think might be the best organisation to lead on those actions and support on those actions. So I suppose there was 3 main workshops. So the first was kind of the partner city workshop. So that was kind of across all the partner cities, ourselves, Munich, Vienna, Rotterdam, all the rest. So we kind of sat down and from our perspective, filled out this grid. So what we thought were the barriers in terms of high priority, medium priority, low priority, and short term, medium term, long term. So that kind of it was the output, I guess, of that initial workshop. And then a similar format was used, but in an online format for the local working group. So again, it was about identifying the barriers under sort of key headings, and then kind of showing the priority and immediacy of those. So similar processes, and then I suppose, as I said, the main kind of output from those workshops then was this action list. So this is essentially a living document that will be updated throughout its life. As certain actions get delivered, they'll be crossed off the list. New actions will be added, as other barriers maybe reveal themselves, and priorities might change, or there might be a review of who might be the best organisation to lead or support on those. And dates, I'm sure will kind of move around a bit as well. I suppose the other thing was that we kind of proposed that a lot of these actions in a Dublin context form part of the Zero Together project. So the ongoing management of Dublin's energy transition, and in this regard, the heat transition will be kind of governed through that process. So yeah, if you click on the document, then you'll kind of see this kind of format. So essentially what we have is the category. So these are categories we've used. So it's sort of a variation of your typical PESTEL type analysis. But we've split it down into kind of knowledge and skills, resources, be they human or financial resources, regulatory policy and planning actions, kind of technology specific actions, mindset awareness and engagement actions, governance structures, legal, environmental, and other. So we've kind of worked our way through those different aspects and identified barriers in each, and then the action to address those. And we've included a completion date, a lead organisation, support organisation, and supporting information. So this is kind of roughly what it looks like when you click into the report. That's just as an example. Yeah, so what we might do now is maybe just now there's 65 actions, so we won't go through every action. It'll save your brains if we go through 65 actions, but we've picked out a few that we can run through in a bit more detail. So My colleague Neil is going to run through a few as well, and then I'll jump back on and run through a few at the end. So I might hand over to you there, Neil.
Yep, thanks very much, John. So as John mentioned, we're just going to run through some of the kind of the more interesting, some of those key actions that we identified in the transition roadmap. Up in the top left there, you can kind of see the status of each of the actions, whether it's not started, if it's ongoing, or whether it's complete as well. So yeah, we'll just be running through a few of these. So I suppose one of the key actions that has definitely come out of the transition roadmap is the requirement for heat network zoning. As John mentioned, district heating is going to be a key technology for decarbonising heating in the Dublin region, but also, in the whole Ireland as well. And what is a heat network zone? Well, it's a designated area where district heating is the lowest cost, lowest carbon solution for decarbonising heating. And I suppose prior to this policy being enacted, heat planning should be carried out at a local authority level to collect critical heat demand data. And a good example of this would have been the Dublin Region Energy Master Plan that John mentioned earlier. So you've seen that map before, it popped up in one of the previous slides, and the areas that are identified or shown in blue are kind of areas that are more suitable for individual or standalone heat pump systems, whereas the areas in red are more suitable for district heating based on heat demand density. And these could be categorized as heat network zones. So I suppose once a zone is then identified, heat consumers in that particular zone should be mandated to connect in a prescribed time frame. And this is if a network available, and if a network is not available, they'll be future-proofed for connection. If you can just flick onto the next slide there, John. And I suppose in addition to this, I think a heat network zoning pilot probably needs to be undertaken. This is to test how a zone is identified and defined, but also, what requirements are put on buildings to connect within zones, and then what requirements are needed in local governments to enact it as well. And I think particularly for zoning to be an effective measure, we've seen this in countries like Denmark, and they're now starting to do it in Scotland and the UK as well. A legal mandate needs to be adopted at a national and a local level to enforce it as well. And probably most importantly of all, I think gas infrastructure needs to be phased down in line with district heating deployment, and then technology-specific grants that are linked to the preferred technology in the zone need to be enacted as well. And I suppose this is kind of the carrot and stick approach to establishing district heating as a viable technology in Dublin. Let's jump on there as well, John. So I suppose two kind of key pieces of work that Codema are working on currently that are related to heat network zoning. The first of those is energy statements. So we're working with Dublin City Council at the moment, and there's now a new policy in place that states that a climate action energy statement will need to be submitted for all significant new developments. And this applies to developments involving 30 residential units and or more than 1,000 square meters of commercial floor space. And as of the 12th of December 2022, this is now a requirement, and it's in the Dublin City Council Development Plan as well. So these energy statements will be used to collect key energy data that can then be used to identify heat network zones. And I've kind of included a little snapshot of some of the information required. So you can see for a new development, they'll be required to submit whether or not the heating system is centralized or decentralized, whether it's being intended to connect to a local district heating network, but also information surrounding the energy costs, the annual space heating requirement or the domestic hot water requirement, and also additional information like CO2 emissions or the BER rating of the proposed development as well. I can jump on there, John. And then the second key piece of policy that we're working on at the moment, and this is directly linked to energy statements, is district heating enablement. So this also applies to significant developments, and they'll be required to investigate local heat sources and networks, and where feasible to demonstrate that the proposed development will be district heating enabled to facilitate a connection to available or developing district heating network. And this effectively means that there's a centralized wet-based heating system and not an electric one. And this initial proposal applied to just the Docklands strategic development and regeneration area, but has since been extended to all SDRAs in the Dublin City region. And this will be really crucial in ensuring that Dublin City is ready for district heating as the technology expands. As we're currently at, there's only one district heating or one large scale district heating network in the Dublin region. That's the Tala district heating scheme, but there's plans for multiple schemes in the Dublin City region and area as well. So I'll just hand you back over to John just to run through the next couple of actions.
Yeah, thanks, Neil. Yeah, so I suppose another key action that we identified, which great progress has been made on since we've identified it, which is great, is kind of required updates to the Planning Act. So district heating is public infrastructure and will need to be installed in public roads to kind of reach all the buildings it needs to reach. So I suppose there's been an update to the Planning and Development Act, which now kind of puts it on the same footing as wires or sewage pipes in terms of planning exemptions, which is great. So it kind of allows for installation of or easier installation of pipes, I guess, without kind of worrying complexity of going through different forms of planning. So in the past, I know the Tala network, for example, used Part 8 planning for its planning, but this provides a bit more of a clear-cut route to gaining planning, I guess, which is a great development. So there's a link there to the latest bill, which hopefully soon will be enacted. So you can see the relevant sections there, section 146 and 248, where there's a reference made to district heating pipes. I suppose another kind of key one is and was something that was reflected actually in the district heating steering group report, which we have a picture of there in the bottom right, is the need for some sort of like delivery unit or support unit to help deliver projects. So and I suppose be the holders of the purse strings if there's to be a dedicated national delivery fund as well. So as we said, district heating is a green infrastructure, which as an infrastructure, I guess, generally requires significant upfront capital investment, but then has low sort of operational costs. So a fund as well is kind of one of the recommendations to I guess promote or expedite the delivery of district heating projects. I suppose the kind of unit itself, I guess be responsible for providing kind of project development assistance, essentially, so kind of technical and financial support for anyone who's looking to develop a district heating network, and ensuring that all the various aspects of that delivery process are delivered to a high standard. So I suppose the kind of delivery unit itself would probably be looking at basically to kind of plan and actioning the kind of strategic delivery of district heating at all levels, so be it policy or kind of individual projects. So they provide that supporting role across the country. They'd also carry out capacity building at all levels as well. So engaging with stakeholders, regulators, supply chain, investment funds, all those sort of things to kind of get everything in alignment, I suppose. And yeah, as I said, kind of on the ground then providing support for delivery of projects, through kind of feasibility, planning, procurement, etc. And then kind of, I suppose, taking the learnings from that and feeding it back into the higher levels of policy and all the rest. So kind of a key supporting role there. I suppose as part of that as well, sort of a piece that can help support on that is guide for developing feasibility studies for district heating projects, which is currently under development. We're working on behalf of SAI to help deliver that at the moment. So that's kind of another I guess supporting document that can help with delivery. And hopefully it'll be a good resource for delivery units once, well, it's being set up, but it's fully set up yet. So I suppose we're kind of drawing from best practice from other countries as well, countries like in the UK where they have a heat networks delivery unit that to kind of provide a lot of this support and strategic direction. So one of the other important actions is having an integrated heat planning team for the heat transition. So this would basically include representatives from all the utilities, be it gas, electricity, district heating. And I suppose there's kind of a need to coordinate so that there's so that the best holistic decarbonisation option is realised, that the best data can be used for decision making, that there's good kind of coordination when you're switching supply of customers, say from gas to heat pumps or gas to district heating, that the infrastructure is there and can be rolled out in time to facilitate that, so that people aren't getting into situations where they're not being supplied at certain periods. So it's kind of that kind of forward planning for infrastructure requirements would be a key element of what this team would do. I guess to support that as well, we've looked at things like legal requirements for utilities to provide fuel consumption information for heat planning, and that's something that's been done in other jurisdictions. So Baden-Württemberg in Germany and Hessen in Germany are kind of two regions where this requirement is in place, and I know in Vienna they're looking at similar. So yeah, I guess making sure that the best kind of real data is available for these decisions, and also to, I suppose, enable kind of local planning teams as well, to kind of upskilling them so that they're aware of how they might be able to support through development of county development plans or zoning or things like that, so that there's good links between kind of the people who are doing a lot of the work at the cold base and kind of the more strategic stuff. The other one that I think is interesting is that we've put in is kind of raising awareness about thermal energy storage. So I think we found that thermal energy storage can play a big role, especially when it comes to things like grid balancing and kind of reducing need for electricity grid reinforcement and reducing curtailment of renewables as well. So we did a study actually during the year which looked at this aspect. It was an FDI RDD study, and we found that if we achieved the district heating target, then we could provide up to 86% reduction in curtailment in 2030 if we achieved the district heating target for that year. And again, it's a cost-effective kind of holistic solution where we're kind of we're removing that silo thinking that was common in the past, and looking at how by working together we can provide better value for the entire energy system. And we're also looking at further research in kind of enabling district heating owners to provide these services in the next year as well. So kind of getting into the details of it, and then hopefully making those learnings available as well for others to follow. And then just I guess the graph here is a graph from Aalborg University, which kind of looks at the relative cost of storage, and I guess it's something that's kind of reflected in our own research that basically large scale thermal energy storage is a fraction of the cost of battery storage, even large scale battery storage. So like even here this is kind of just some findings from the work we did during the year. So now we've done a kind of a bigger comparison, I guess, of different forms of thermal energy storage. Part of this as well, 8 different types of storage, and compared it with battery storage. So we're just kind of pulling out some of the highlights here as a sort of a high level comparative. So you can see that your kind of standard battery energy storage system, which is on the bottom, is a surprise to me, but takes up a significantly more land area compared to thermal energy storage for the same megawatt hours. So this is all based on 200 megawatt hour size, and it's significantly cheaper as well. So typically 1% of the cost of that large scale battery storage, and even in that's considering that the thermal energy storage wouldn't already exist for other reasons. So a certain amount of that thermal storage will probably exist for kind of general flexibility of operating the network and stuff like that. So it could, in essence, be a free resource once developed, and as such provide a very cost competitive means of providing flexibility to the electricity grid. So just to kind of pull out some of the figures, so these are some of the figures from the study as well in terms of curtailment reduction. So we kind of looked at the Dublin district heating scheme on its own for the various years and what impact that could have on the kind of national curtailment. So by 2040, we saw that could be reduced by up to 8.6%, and then that national target, you know, is in that kind of 70 to 86% bracket. I'll jump back to you then, Neil, just on this one.
Yeah, so I think another kind of, and leading on from the thermal energy storage as well, in terms of very kind of interesting development is you know, exploring the viability of deep geothermal energy as a source for district heating. So we're currently working on a project on the Grange Gorman campus, which is located in Dublin City. And this is a large campus that's mainly comprised of academic and healthcare buildings, and it's also set to undergo a significant expansion in the coming years. So I suppose one of the benefits of the Grange Gorman campus is that it has an existing district heating network on site, and it has also, you know, been put in place to it and sized for the expansion of the network, which will subsist of about 30 buildings when it's fully built. And this network currently runs on 14.5 megawatts of gas-fired boilers. And this is sufficient to serve it up until about 2030, and from that point onwards, it will need a kind of a system expansion to cater for the increased load. So the Grange Gorman Development Agency are looking to decarbonise this district heating network and in turn the heat supply for the entire campus. And to do so, it's looking to utilise a deep geothermal energy source. So you can click onto the next slide there, John. So we ourselves at Codema, we're not geothermal experts. We engage with Geological Survey Ireland, GSI, to ascertain likely heat capacity from a 2.5 kilometre borehole on the Grange Gorman site. That's kind of what's planned for the campus. There's been a test borehole that has been dug up to a kilometre, and the results of that test borehole have shown that there is a likely geothermal gradient of about 32 degrees per kilometre. So at 2.5 kilometres, you could expect anywhere in the region from 60 to maybe 80 degrees of temperature coming out of the ground. And, you know, at a kind of conservative estimate, you could decarbonise the heat supply on that campus by up to 79% compared to gas-fired heating systems. And this percentage obviously increases depending on the temperature that comes out of the ground, as there's kind of a linear relationship between the source of the temperature and also the coefficient of performance of the district heating system connected to it. So you can click on there, John. So yeah, this graph kind of just shows the, you know, the potential there that if the district heating network was connected to the deep geothermal source in 2026, you know, that reduction of emissions just happens overnight. And I suppose that's the real advantage of having a district heating network, you know, connected to a large scale campus. And I think, you know, in particular for a city centre campus, whether it's a healthcare facility like a hospital or an academic facility like a university, you know, space is always in high demand. And I think deep geothermal will definitely be a really good fit for those types of campuses, as, you know, most of the energy comes from the subsurface geothermal collector, and you don't require the same level of space requirement as, say, an air source heat pump or even kind of a shallow geothermal array as well. So we very much see this as kind of a pilot project for deep geothermal district heating in Ireland, and if we can prove this, it's a success, I think we'll see these types of systems popping up all over Ireland on similar campuses as well. So I'll just pop you back over to John there as
well. Sorry about me. Thanks, Neil. Yeah, so I guess one of the other aspects that we looked at was, you know, the gas network, and, you know, in certain areas, the need for that to be phased down. So particularly in the areas where it's currently used to provide space heating and hot water. So it may be maintained for things like process heating, power generation, all the rest of it. But I suppose there is a need to avoid stranded assets and the costs associated with that. And, you know, renewable gases are kind of a, what would you call it, like a high, you know, quite expensive and, you know, a kind of yeah, so as a result, I suppose they kind of need to be used in kind of higher exergy applications. So not for space heating, but for kind of higher temperature kind of applications, essentially in power generation. So the way this has kind of been done, I guess, in other jurisdictions is kind of set deadlines. So a deadline in terms of, say, installing gas boilers, but then a deadline for when gas will stop flowing through the network. So you're sending a signal to people saying, in this area, the gas network will be gone in, say, 10 years. You need to start making plans to move away from that. And on the next slide, we kind of, I guess, show what's already being done in Switzerland. So one of the project partners is the city of Winterthur in Switzerland. So we've had a few presentations from them on what's happening in Switzerland at the moment. And I guess this slide is just shows a picture of Zurich. And I guess the regions of Zurich where they've already decommissioned the gas network and the areas that the decommissioning is currently under investigation as well. So similar laws are already in place in Winterthur, which is kind of a town which is just outside Zurich. And you can find the link to it there. And there's also kind of an ACER report on future regulation of gas networks, which provides some interesting content as well. But yeah, I suppose it was just interesting to see that this is already being done elsewhere. Yeah, I kind of touched on this previously about the kind of having dedicated fund and the kind of need to have that when you're talking about low carbon infrastructure that has that high kind of upfront capital. I suppose the other aspect of that is that having a fund essentially provides a signal to the market that can also spark wider kind of private sector involvement. So we've kind of seen that as a means to attract private investment into the sector as well. So currently, I guess the current kind of projects that have been developed, so the two kind of projects in Dublin, the Tala project and the Dublin district heating project, have received funding through the CAFT Climate Action Fund, but there are limits on that as well, especially when you're talking about bigger projects in terms of how much it can provide. And I suppose the future of that is we're not 100% certain on what that is. So having a dedicated fund would be a very clear signal of intent. And one other kind of key one, I guess, that's key to the business case for district heating. So the key or the biggest risk for any project is demand risk. So I guess having confidence that people will connect to your network, and zoning is one way of looking at that. But then there's also other aspects that feed into that as well, and one of those is the Multi-Unit Development Act. So currently there's a limit on the length of contract you can have someone to supply their, in this case, heat. And I suppose that is a barrier in itself. When you're talking about projects that have larger upfront capital but lower operational costs, that can be, I suppose, those kind of upfront capital costs could be spread across a longer time period to reduce the kind of barrier to entry for people. But with this kind of limit of 3 years, it kind of makes it difficult to do that. There's still a significant upfront cost for connection if you're only able to secure a connection for 3 years. So that's kind of one other kind of key action that we've identified. So yeah, I guess that's kind of a whistle-stop tour of some of the actions. As I said, the full kind of 65 actions are available on the Decarb City Pipes. So the Dublin Transition Roadmap is published on the Decarb City Pipes website. I haven't actually put in the link on this slide, but I can add it into the slides, and when we share the slides after, you can have it there. So yeah, no, if you're interested in the area, definitely feel free to have a leaf through that, or you can also get in contact with ourselves, either myself or Neil, if you have any follow-up questions as well. And I know we're going to do a Q&A now, so hopefully we'll be able to address a few of those initially here now, but if there's any more, feel free to follow up with us as well. So yeah, thanks very much. So I might just jump into the, oh, thanks Neil for sharing the link to the website there in the chat. So yeah, you'll find it on the website there anyway. Okay, so some of the questions. So a question from Bill. Is there a planned route for DH pipe network in Dublin? Has it been sized to take account of likely extensions to make it future-proofed? So I don't think any route has been finalized as far as I'm aware. I think some routes have been looked at. I think the initial pipe will try and maximize the heat from the energy from waste plant, I think is the current thinking, but there is also further consideration of heat supply options in the area that might need to be considered, but I don't think any route has been finalized yet. So that'll be once the project goes to procurement, it'll be a sort of a decision of the kind of joint venture partners that'll be working with Dublin City Council to decide on the best route for the network. So thanks for that, Bill. It answers the question. A question from Xavier: are thermal storage costs on the spatial view slide yours for kilowatt hour or megawatt hour? Let me just jump back there. Maybe it's a typo by me. Euros per megawatt. Yeah, that's probably, it might have been 1,000 euros per megawatt hour, maybe. I have to go back and check that now. My brain isn't working with certain mind. But yeah, I think it is. It is probably kilowatt hours, yeah. So thanks for that, Xavier. Sorry. How likely, so it's a question from Stephen Cole here, how likely will Irish government start to decarb zones in coming years? Is there an appetite to do so? That's a good question. I guess all I can say is as part of the steering group discussions, the National District Heating Steering Group discussions, the kind of zoning element has been mentioned. So I guess at a national level, people are aware of it. So I guess it's to be decided whether we go down that route, like just kind of different variations of it as well. Like say, for example, England and Wales have a different zoning policy to Scotland. So there's like forget which is which now, Neil, you might remember, but one of them, it's basically public buildings, large public buildings are mandated to connect. And the other, it's kind of a broader requirement for buildings to connect. So yeah, I guess there's zoning is slightly different in different areas, and then obviously you've got the Danish example where everyone's mandated to connect, or were until a few years ago. So yeah, I suppose there's different flavors of district heating zoning, but I don't know if you have anything to add on that, Neil.
No, I think that covers it. I suppose there's one of the aspects of zoning in particular is that there's a kind of a certain social and political element to it as well. That just because the policy worked in Denmark for many years doesn't necessarily mean that it'll work in Ireland, and it's different in the UK and Scotland as well. So I suppose that's where something like a zoning pilot would come into use, because you can kind of use a particular area as a test bed to see if mandated connections would work for residential, or mandated connections are just something that would work for public sector. So yeah, I think it's definitely a policy that needs to be explored in Ireland, but there needs to be a number of steps that happened first before we can start doing so. Yeah,
and the findings from that UK kind of pilot work would be interesting as well. So I'm sure we'll probably learn from what they're doing as well. Next question: was any consideration given to the use of district heating as a low-cost heat source in low-income areas? using the Hubble index as a guide. Could DH play a role in addressing fuel poverty? Yeah, so I guess so. I would have worked previously in the UK where district heating was essentially used primarily for that reason to help address fuel poverty. It was very common. So there is potential there, and I suppose the other thing as well is probably that the district heating networks that we're developing, they'll be supplying heat at say 80 to 85 degrees. So that means that the requirement to retrofit your building is reduced. So it is potentially just a plug and play replacement for a boiler, but you're getting low carbon heat through it. So obviously the kind of deep retrofitting stuff, there's the barrier to that is based around money availability as well. So it could play a role there as well potentially. So generally, the rule of thumb they used to have in the UK is that district heating was generally 5 to 10% cheaper than the counterfactual. But again, it'll vary depending on what your heat source is. And I suppose the thing that we're seeing now in countries like Denmark, where they're using their own indigenous heat sources, so they're using biomass and waste heat and geothermal and all the rest of it, is that when the gas prices shot up, after the invasion of Ukraine, their district heating prices stayed either the same or slightly lower. So there was a huge difference between, I think it was 90% of all district heating customers had heat price that was the same or lower post invasion, whereas it was the exact opposite with individual. It was 90% of people had a higher cost associated with their heating. So I suppose there's lessons in that for us that we can, well, the upfront cost is big. We're providing a kind of robust local heat market for people to engage in. Yeah, thanks a million for that question. I don't know if there is any others. If people can't find the Q&A, feel free to throw up a hand as well, and I'll try and unmute you. As unfamiliar as I am with Zoom webinars, I'll do my best. And as I said, if anything occurs to people afterwards, feel free to get in touch with us. We're only an email away. Yeah, so I guess if there's nothing else, then we can leave it there and can use the next 9 minutes to reflect. So yeah, thanks again to everyone who joined this morning, and I should say as well, thanks especially to the people who are part of the local working group as well, which helped inform the development of this document. So much appreciated. And yeah, hopefully speak to you again soon. Thanks very much. Oh, sorry, I just saw something coming in there. Last question from Donald. Sorry, is district heat charges linked to electricity costs? Well, it'll depend on the heat source, but I suppose in cases where you might be using heat pumps or something like that, then it would have to be indexed to electricity. So yeah, that would be how we'd see it for those kind of heat pump options. So, question for John. Okay, sorry, John. Let me see if I can unmute you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, John. Yeah.
Hi, John. How are you? Look, I just noticed something in the chat there from Evgeny, and it was about mandating connection to DH. So just as probably most of you know anyway, our department is currently drafting legislation, a proposed heat bill that we'll bring to government next year, and that will include provisions to mandate public buildings to connect to district heat networks where they are available and where it's technically and economically feasible to do so.
Okay, great. Yeah, thanks a million for that, John. That'll be a great addition.
Yeah,
Brilliant.
so that's being done at that at the moment, John.
Yeah, we look forward to the heat bill when it gets published. So yeah, great. Thanks for that. Sorry, let me just do a quick. So I think that's all the questions. Yeah, so yeah, thanks again for everyone's attention, and yeah, hope you enjoy the rest of the day. Thanks very much.